Hello, and welcome to this I Thrive video series called Planning for Success in 2021, featuring Dr. Ron Meeker. Each video will help you identify your priorities, implement your plans, and lay the right foundation for success. This session is called 5 Concepts You Shouldn't Overlook in Your Business Plan. I'm Dr. Scott Jentz, and I'm proud to be serving as your I Thrive interviewer for this video series. And we're featuring the insights of Dr. Ron Meeker, a recently retired doctor of optometry whose 35-year career as a clinician and practice owner allowed him to develop incredibly thoughtful and calculated approaches to business planning. And he now serves as a key contributor to our I Thrive community. It's great to see you again, Dr. Meeker.
Thanks, Scott. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Well, for this video interview, it's time to turn attention to building a business that finds success. I can't wait to hear the processes you've used for planning healthy business growth. Let's foreshadow the conversation by having you outline the 5 concepts that shouldn't be overlooked.
Well, today we're going to discuss the all-important relationship between personal planning and business planning. We'll learn why long-term planning is just as critical for your business as it is for your personal goals. Perhaps the most significant long-term business event is the sale of your practice. It's never too early to start planning for that. We'll give some tips about where to concentrate your business growth efforts depending on the specifics of your practice. And we'll wrap up our talk with some thoughts around identifying what business goals are critical to support your individual long-term plan.
All right, that's great. We concentrated on personal goals in a recent video, and we're now talking about business goals. Naturally, there's an overlap to them. Can you explain how they relate to one another?
Well, I like to think of personal goals as steps on the road to one's ultimate end game and business goals as the means to that end. Setting and achieving personal goals provides motivation, meaning, and direction to guide your business goals. Whereas personal goals vary considerably in both content and degree among individuals, the content of most ECP's business goals is similar. We all want our business to grow.
It's really interesting. I mean, the business is the means to the end, which is the personal ambition. That's really interesting. I appreciate you clarifying that because it strikes me as many ECPs think about their business's end game as their measure of success. That's a great way to look at it. I love that. When does an OD start thinking about their sort of intermediate and longer term business goals?
Well, you really should be thinking about that early on. And today we're still talking about the big picture, setting intermediate and long-term goals for the future of your business. Think about what things do you need to plan for now so that your business provides the means to your ultimate personal goal, whatever that may be. Just as in personal goal setting, I like to begin at the desired end and plan backward. Let's consider the sale of our practice. For many of us, that transaction plays a significant role in our retirement savings. Of course, there are exceptions. Some ECPs have income from other sources that makes their practice sale proceeds relatively less important. Others may view the sale of their current practice as just one step along their entrepreneurial path. But no matter where you fall on this spectrum, successfully growing your business helps you achieve your ultimate personal goal.
Okay. So you have to know what to measure to be able to actually experience growth. What does the ECP measure on its growth path?
Well, the most important indicators of a healthy business are cash flow and true net. To improve performance in these areas, you have to increase revenue and/or decrease expenses. We've all heard the saying, you need to spend money to make money. Smart spending to achieve net return on investment is the key to healthy practice growth. A good way to decide where to begin in setting some intermediate goals is to assess where your business stands with respect to those 2 indicators, cash flow and true net. If your cash flow and net are significantly below expectations, there are often some business metrics that are deviating from the normal, that aren't up to par. It's best to correct these aberrations as a first step to improving business health. As an example, perhaps your capture rate is low. Simply working on the handoff between the OD and the optician can have a significant impact on your net and your cash flow with no financial outlay.
There are a lot of doctors of optometry that aren't experts in growth of revenue or what their true net is. Could you briefly interject for me the kinds of resources you used in your career to get yourself to be sort of a resident expert on that?
Well, initially, I was introduced to that whole concept when I belonged to an information sharing peer group.
Mm.
And going into that in the early 2000s, I really was not familiar with that. But we actually spent a lot of time at that point going through, basically, we had to pull the data from our EHR at the time or from any other business measurements that we had. And we all made a calculated commitment to come to the meeting with our metrics. These days you can look at the journals have some things, and certainly there are much easier these days to have something like a tool like Edge Pro that automatically will do this for you and dovetails with your EHR.
I'm really proud of how optometry has shown this competitive but collaborative approach to business management. Those peer groups are a great example. So let's assume that most ODs think their cash flow and their net are normal for a healthy business. In addition, then, to being even more efficient and increasing your cash flow and net, so you have a typical healthy practice, what kind of other intermediate goals should be considered?
I think a lot depends on where you are in your career. Someone who plans to continue in their present setting for many years might consider adding equipment or adding a new service, possibly adding another optometrist, adding staff. Think about your location. Think about your facility. Are there things you can do? Maybe add a location or update your facility. Or perhaps things are going great and you just want to spend less time in the clinic personally. Think about ways you can make that happen while continuing to grow your business. Each of these undertakings obviously involves careful planning and consideration of your return on investment and the effect it will have on your cash flow and your net. It's important not to lose those leading indicators, let them suffer in pursuit of changes in your practice.
You brought up a really interesting point. I think too few of our colleagues introduce a new type of service. Had you or do people you know, have they done that successfully, whether it be sports vision, low vision, vision therapy? That's a great way to think about expanding the practice footprint.
Yeah. So I personally, the biggest change, again, going back to the early 2000s, was the adoption of the medical model and adding a lot more equipment, which also, along with it, made it so that I had to have a bigger facility, had to have a bigger staff, but it was a big change in my practice, and it was phenomenal growth during that period.
What must be considered by the eye doctor who's looking to sell the practice within, say, 5 years, or planning to retire soon or move on to a completely different career opportunity?
Well, in that case, consider a refresh of your facility if it needs it, and make sure your equipment is up to date and well maintained. If sale to private equity is a goal, maximize EBITDA by keeping the right mix of products, services, and insurances to maintain or increase earnings while looking to reduce costs where possible. Also, make sure you keep your cash flow healthy. If you're considering selling to an ECP, make sure you begin that process early. And also consider obtaining a practice valuation. No matter where you are in your career path, it's important to periodically step back and analyze the big picture. Effective intermediate and long-term planning lead to business growth, which is critical to achieving the ultimate personal goal. Make it a habit to do this at least once per year, and we're about to begin a new year, so there's no better time than the present.
Let me ask you one more thing. I've heard a friend, a prominent optometrist, say that it's very difficult to save your way to prosperity, that controlling costs is really important, but growing the business on the top line is really a much easier lever to move. How do you sit on that point of view?
I think it's absolutely correct, because I know from the attitude I had before going to the information peer group that we talked about to afterward, there's no way that I would have taken the chances, if you will, to buy a building, renovate that building, buy a lot of new equipment. And looking back on it, had I not done those things, I would not have succeeded in sitting here today being retired at age 61. Wouldn't have had the same personal goals and wouldn't have achieved them. It's
appreciate
critical.
That's really great perspective. Thanks again for sharing your experiences. Your perspective is incredibly valuable.
Thanks, Scott, and thanks to GPN for the opportunity to contribute to this great resource for ECPs.
To our iThrive community of listeners, thanks for watching this iThrive video, part of our series called Planning for Success in 2021. Check out each video in this series to make sure you get the best perspective for your optimal planning processes for the new year. Until our next iThrive interview, be great at all you do.